It's October 26, 2018. I was looking at the one of the ballot propositions, Measure T for North Monterey County Fire, pushing to have us vote on a tax increase on parcel taxes, I guess, and also for businesses, so that they can generate another 750,000 plus for equipment and whatever else. So I took it upon myself to do a little background, and I went to Transparent California and looked up and added up the amount of overtime that they had, and this is most recent information, is like 2 years old, and it came up to over $600,000 in overtime. And relatively small station, they have some reserves that don't get paid that much, but I just took a random out of the hat firefighter that was making $65,000, which is above the median income, household income in the state of California, which is $60,000, and that's a household compared to one guy. I think individuals around 30 and change, but for individual average income. So that person making $65,000 at North County Fire brought in another $38,000 in overtime. So I continued digging and looking, and I see 3 people on staff at North County Fire, including the chief, that make $200,000+. That's benefit package. That's everything. That's what it costs the taxpayers. Sometimes these people don't see it that way. They just see what their take-home pay is. But the overall package is they have retirement benefits. I'm not begrudging them, that. There's health benefits. That's great. You got health insurance, et cetera, but that's all part of your compensation package, and that needs to be taken into consideration when you're asking people like myself that make above the median, but we're the people that are paying the bills, basically. I did bring up the CSA 74 funding that I've heard from a number of people about, that the health department does make sure that the fire agencies that are involved and receive that money, they're audited on a regular basis, but the health department itself isn't audited in how they disperse or take in that revenue. And I've heard from people that past leadership at the health department was buying $10,000 office desks, and that happened on a number of occasions for people at the executive level. That's what I was told. So why not audit the health department and see where that revenue is going? It's not going to, fill in the blanks for what they need or what they want, but $600,000 in overtime, I'm thinking you could probably cut some corners or maybe hire people to fill in those spaces, because when you're paying overtime, you're paying more than the actual fill the body space is worth. Then there's the issue of their equipment. And when I just was down at the local grocery store here, I spoke with the firefighters that are out there holding the signs saying, vote yes on this measure, blah, blah, blah. And they were receptive to, talking to me about it. I didn't record it because I didn't want to, put them on blast. I just figured I'd go see what I could find out from them. They have their union, T-shirts on and so forth, and they're out there and they're doing what unions do. They're trying to get more money for their people or more benefits, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't note in the reading of the measure that it specifies that none of the money would be used for personnel, because their argument was they were going to be short money because they're losing grant funding that's funding 5 people, and they're losing money from the Moss Landing power plant that funded, paid a higher rate of tax at one time, and it's dropped down significantly. But the one thing that I always ask, because I've talked to a number of firefighters, chiefs and captains and so forth, was why is it the fire department is continuing to go to fire calls where they have to pick somebody up off the floor? Granny falls out of the chair, they call the fire department, the ambulance will show up and the fire department, and it seems like a duplication of efforts. The ambulance service in our county is private operation, and I'm thinking if they had more calls in a particular area, which they usually do, is they move an ambulance closer to the location if one's being used so that they have coverage. Well, if the rate of calls increases over a period of time, they're just going to add more ambulances because they're generating revenue off of picking people up or responding to these calls. Most of the time, I'm sure that they're getting stiffed to a certain degree for picking the drunks up off the street and et cetera, et cetera. But in this circumstance, I could see where, you don't necessarily need a firefighter. When I spoke with the battalion chief one time, he said that, well, we're trying to justify our positions nowadays because we have better building codes, we have sprinkler systems, we have CO2 alarms in houses, and the carbon monoxide detectors and the smoke detectors. And a lot of the mandated, code issues have solved a lot of problems when it comes to structure fires. So you're not having them as much. But to justify your existence, well, if you're no longer needed in a certain realm, then stop trying to come up with new ways to, keep your job. Maybe it's time that you stop doing those things that, like the ambulance chasing thing. I can understand when you have to go to a fire or an accident or something, like you might have to do extrication on a vehicle or get people out of, whatever. I can understand that. But, chasing the ambulance around to pick people up, or the minimal calls that, it's just, it doesn't make sense to drive a huge truck to these locations and, then complain about your vehicle maintenance and upkeep, et cetera, et cetera. So I've already voted. I mailed in my ballot. I voted against it. I support firefighters in general. I was a volunteer for almost 3 years in another county, and I enjoyed it. I went to classes from, EMT and Firefighter 1, et cetera, so I understand what they go through. And, I only got $8 a call. So that's, I don't want to hear the complaints about revenue when you have 3 guys making over $200,000 and the median in this state is 60. And, I see a larger department, somebody making an equivalent amount to what these guys are making here in the county. And I just don't see how you justify that. It's easy to continue to ask us for more, but when you have $600,000 in overtime on your books, maybe we need to ask you for more by spending less or spending more in a wiser fashion. Anyways, I just wanted to put my 2 cents out there, and it doesn't hurt to look things up and or talk to people to get answers to questions. Peace.